Sounds awesome. Good evening. So are we on my page now?
We are on your page for sure.
Okay. Oh, there we are. Awesome. Welcome, everyone. This is just like old times, Jamelle, you and I sitting here on Zoom, right?
It really is.
I love it.
Except for this time, I won't be complaining, I assure you.
Well, that's awesome because we're going to be honoring you and you're going to be sharing some really cool things. So as people are coming on, we would love for you to say hello, give us hearts. It's 5 o'clock right now, so we're just going to give you a second or two to hop on. We want to know you're here because we have some really amazing things to share with you. You know, I wanted to say one of the reasons that well, the main reason actually I asked Jamil to be on this call with me tonight is because of his book, The 12 Shifts. And when there is something available to us that can impact our life in such a huge way, we just have to share it. So I said, why don't you hop on with me so we can get the word out to people who maybe haven't seen it, don't know you. I can't imagine. Is there anyone really that doesn't know you yet? I can't imagine.
Lots of
So just give us hearts and say hello when you hop on. We want to know you're here. And I'm just really, really excited to introduce my great friend, Jamelle Frazier. So this is especially cool for me to say when I introduce him. He's a best-selling author. Whoa. He's a motivational speaker. He's a certified health coach, personal development coach, and recently added celebrity as he and his family were just on an episode of House Hunters. I know many of you have seen it. Later, we'll put that in the thread so you can see for sure. He and his beautiful wife, Amanda, and their gorgeous 3 children live in the San Diego area. And honestly, I have had the privilege and honor of working with Jamelle since 2012. That seems so long ago, but it seems like it just happened, doesn't it? I feel like I've known you forever, all of our life.
Mhm.
And since we're about the same age, that would make perfect sense.
Just about. Just about.
So as you read in his book, The 12 Shifts, in the beginning, we certainly had our moments. You might see the name Karen in there, and that would be me. So I remember those days, and we both learned so much. But I am so proud of him and what he's bringing to others. And what I love most about Jamil is his vulnerability, his honesty, his commitment, his compassion, and his passion to truly make a difference in the world. So his newly released book, bestseller, as I said, The 12 Shifts, is his gift to the world. And I know it was created from lots of blood, sweat, and tears and experiences, his personal challenges and his experiences that really created these shifts. He could have kept all these shifts, all of this information to himself, but no. He created this book, or handbook, as I like to look at it, for anyone who has a desire to be more, have more, do more, and truly unlock your superpowers. So Jamelle, thank you so much for joining me here today. It's such an honor to have you here. I love it.
Well,
So I would love, go ahead.
I was just going to say that was some type of introduction. I better say something worth listening to.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. I had to set you up and get y'all going. But you know what? Those things are so true. It's so cool because I couldn't have said that 8 years ago. I mean, this has happened to you in the last 7 or 8 years.
Yeah.
And that, to me, you are such a miracle. And I love you so much for what you've done for not only for yourself and your family, but just everyone that you come into contact with. So I would really love for you to bring us up to date, where you're from, what was life like for you growing up, and what really brought you to this point?
Oh, well, that's a mouthful. I think first and foremost, I want to say thank you to you. You know, I did write about you quite a bit in the book, but how could you not on a journey like this? You have, in many ways, been a saving grace to me, and there's no way I would be where we are at right now without having God uniquely put you into my life, and that's for sure. And I'm not saying that if you guys know Karen, she tears up pretty easily, but you know, she dedicated so many hours upon hours and upon hours of breathing life into me and encouraging me and helping me. Um, and I've learned up until this point that really God has put very, very special people on my path, and you're certainly one of them. How did we get here? You know, I grew up in Southern California in a city called Pasadena, to essentially a single mother. My mom is one of those women who can somehow put the world on her back and make it look somewhat easy. Um, my father was in and out of prison while I was growing up, so my mom took on the primary role of raising my siblings and I. But my mom had a rough start. You know, she at a young age, both of her parents passed away within about 6 weeks of each other, and she was left to contend for her youngest sibling, her younger brother, who consequently was murdered in gang violence. And from that moment, she fell into somewhat of a depression and really started becoming dependent on alcoholism or alcohol and drugs. And I always say that one of the biggest gifts that she gave us, though, was even in that state of mind, she moved us about 11 miles east to a new city to where I really started to develop. At that point, I fell in love with sports, and I knew that my life's ambition was to become a really good football player and receive a football scholarship to a 4-year university, which I eventually did. And so I went off to college. I played really well. I did very, very well in academics, graduated um, um, towards the top of my class. Upon graduating, got into pharmaceutical sales with a company that you guys may have heard of, Johnson and Johnson, and really just strove to become the best that I could be and make a life for myself. Along that path, I got married to a wonderful woman, a beautiful girl. I always say I lost a bet, and that's how I'm with her right now. But then we got pregnant, and this is where things really shifted for me. Once we got pregnant, I got scared, Karen, and I didn't think that I would be a great dad. I also wanted out of the marriage, and once we got pregnant, I asked my wife if she would consider having an abortion, and she reluctantly, um, she wouldn't do it. And at that moment, I fell into a deep, dark depression for 2 years. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. I had no hope. And in that process, I gained weight, as we usually do once we're not feeling very well. And about on the tail end of those 2 years, I started looking for a solution. And a good friend of mine said, you know, you should really talk to my mom. She's a health coach and she can help you. And so after wavering on his words, I did reach out to his mom. And that's where my journey really started. I lost the weight. I started to get myself healthier physically. And then I started to feel a little bit better. And then along that path, I had the opportunity to now start to reach out and help a few people start on their health journey. And then I had a chance to go to a seminar. And at that seminar, that's where my new life really started. I decided I wanted to quit my job. I got inspired that weekend. I wanted to quit my job. I wanted to come back home. I wanted to build a business with helping other people. And quite frankly, I wanted to change my life by helping other people change their lives. And that's really how we got here. So over the last 8 years of building a business, of trying to serve others, I've had many, many awakenings. I call them in the book, I call them shifts, things that I used to believe that I no longer believe. And I wanted to leave a trail. I wanted to write about it and help anyone else who may have done all the right things. I mean, they went to school. I never drank. I never did drugs. I never did any of that stuff. I got good grades, college athlete, great job, and was still stuck in a depression, wondering how am I going to get my way out of this and really make a life for myself. So I wanted to leave a trail and a wake behind me, and so that's how we got here, and that's what inspired me to write the book.
Wow. And so what a long way you've come, because as you said, from the outside, things looked really wonderful. But inside you were dying inside. Life wasn't good for you. And that was about the time we met. You know, Ezra was very little, very young, and we connected back then. And I remember over the years that we've known each other, you talking about your stories and you talking about your shifts that you've made and that you've learned along the way. And you shared with me, and I remember this. It's like, yeah, there's a shift, Karen. I've written about it, and someday, what'd you tell me? Someday I'm going to write a book.
Mm-hmm.
Someday I'm going to share these shifts with people. And how exciting! Here we are. And what I would really love to know, like, I know you said you wanted to leave a wake, but I know that there's way more than that. What really has been your greatest desire and passion to bring these tools in the 12 shifts to others?
I think my greatest desire is to help people awaken, to help people transform. Um, I think that there's a lot of people that's missing combinations in their life. It's almost like we're walking around with this lock, and we might have 6 or 7 numbers to really get that lock open so that we can start to become free. And a lot of us have 2 of the numbers. We might have 3. A handful of us have 4 or 5, but very few have all 6. And I'm not proclaiming that I have all 6, but my hope is that from reading this book and getting this material, we at least get another number. And so we get a step closer to opening up and popping open that lock of transformation and freedom. I think that there's so many people that's out there that's living the same story, which was my story, and they're wanting to do better in so many different ways. They just don't know how to. And so
Mhm.
when I wrote this book, I wrote it honestly. I wrote it to my 31-year-old self. When you and I met, I was 31. Now I'm 39. And there were so many things that I didn't know. I didn't even know to know many of the things. And so I figured if I could, have the accoutrements in the world's eyes, I could have the successful job, I could have the beautiful wife, I could have the handsome son, I could have these things, and yet I'm still suffering. Then there's got to be millions of other people that are also feeling that way too, and they just don't know. And so I wanted to leave that for them. My greatest desires is to see people become free. And freedom looks different for everyone else, for everyone.
Mhm.
But I want to see them be able to do the things that they want to do and live in abundance.
I love that. So, those of you listening, if you've already read the 12 shifts, please feel free to share in the thread how this book has impacted you. Because I hear so many stories, and obviously I know Jamil does too. And it's one of the things I hear a lot is, Karen, wow, I can't even believe this book. I felt like he was talking directly to me. I hear that a lot, and I love that. So you've become, I should say, a really successful businessman, business owner. I know often with success, most don't see what goes on behind the scenes, you know? They don't see how much you've studied, how much you've practiced, how much you've worked on yourself. You hear things like, "Oh, Jamelle, you're a natural. You know, Jamelle, this is so easy for you. I can see it just comes easy. But this isn't easy for me, for you." Most people don't think it's possible for them, just like you said. I would love to for you to talk a little bit about shift 2. What happened when you made the decision to do your own push-ups? When you decided to really take radical responsibility for your future?
What happened was immediate change. But saying to do your own push-ups and doing your own push-ups is a strike contrast. There's a big difference between one and the other. Um, Shift number 2, I often talk about it. My favorite shift in the book is shift 10, but shift number 1, shift number 2, and shift number 3. and the introduction were all written in the first 2 days that I started writing the 12 shifts. It was so easy to write those shifts because, um, um, well, because uh, uh, they were so intimate to me. You have to understand, um, when you grow up the way that I grow up, and most people do this anyway, we get really good with the blame game, don't we? So
Mhm.
I grew up on welfare. I never have known my mother to have a job up until now, to where she went to work and she got paid and she brought that paycheck home. I've never known that. My father was not present. He was not there. Um, uh, from the time I can remember, some of my um, the days I look forward to the most were the 1st and the 15th, because that's when we got our benefits. That's when we got our food stamps. That's when we got our WIC, things like that. That's when we could go and get groceries. And that's when I started to feel like a quote unquote normal kid. So when you grow up with a lot of the situations that I did, you get really good at blaming life and circumstances on outside forces. And so when I met you, that's largely what I had grown to do. I wasn't where I wanted to be in my healthy body because my wife was bringing all of these unhealthy foods into the house. I wasn't where I wanted to be in my happiness and my fulfillment because my wife wouldn't go along with having an abortion. Even when I started working with you and I started growing my health coaching business, I wasn't where I wanted to be in my happiness and fulfillment and where I wanted to be in my success because you weren't helping me enough. I wasn't where I wanted to be in in my overall well-being because God had abandoned me. I didn't make it to work on time because traffic was too heavy. So I had basically, I went to school and I got a PhD in life. But that PhD, that doctoral degree, was in blame and not taking responsibility. And so I write about in shift number two, really what happened was a conversation that you and I had years ago. You might you might remember this one well, but we were at an event in Texas, and I was
Yes.
very upset with you. See, I had reached this level in my business, but I always felt like it wasn't happening. It wasn't happening for me, and it certainly wasn't happening fast enough. And the biggest reason that wasn't happening was because you weren't training me well enough. You weren't investing enough time in me. You were spending too much time with other people. You wouldn't return my phone calls. You wouldn't do a call for me when I wanted to do it. Basically, you weren't at my beck and call. You weren't really helping to resurrect my business. And that's why I was at the state that I was. And whenever I felt like that, I always wrote people off. And so I was literally had these walls up and was writing you off. And and this was the first time that really you had had enough of it. And so
Did.
you asked to speak with me outside, and said some really profound things to me. One of the things you told me was that that this isn't the way that leaders show up in the world, and I need to figure out what I want to be. Do I want to be someone who's normal, who's always sort of blaming their circumstances on outside forces, or did I want to show up as a leader in my own life and in my own business? And then you told me, you said, you know, I would really identify where this is coming from because this isn't on me. This is on you. And that was really tough to hear. And upon going home, I started thinking about it. And I started thinking about, you know what? I used to be a really good athlete. And I used to just work out like crazy, because I knew the more that I worked out, the harder that I worked, the more hours I put in, the more sweat equity I had, the more push-ups I did, the more sit-ups I did, the more miles I ran, the more weights I lifted. That was on me. And while I was in pursuit of that college football scholarship, and while I was in pursuit of keeping my full-time my full-time starting position once in college, it was all about me versus me. And I wasn't looking towards my coaches. I wasn't looking towards my teammates. I wasn't looking towards anyone else. But what am I going to do? Am I going to come home after? And I went to a college to where you had 3 days of chapel, and you had to take at least 120 courses of theology on top of your undergraduate courses. And so we would have long days, 2, 3 times practice, chapel, plus all these other credits that you had to do. And I would come home and I would bust out the sit-ups, and then I would turn over and I would do my push-ups. And then I would get up and I would just go. And it was me versus me. And so that shift was, this is the way that life is. Life is Jamil versus Jamil. And although you can have all these people that can be there, that may help you, ultimately it is up to you, young man. And so it dawned on me, you got to start doing your own push-ups, not just for your physical prowess and body, but for your entire life. You sitting here blaming your wife isn't going to cut it. You sitting here blaming business partners isn't going to cut it. You sitting here blaming the government isn't going to cut it. You sitting here blaming traffic isn't going to cut it. The most egregious thing that I would do is blame my 1-year-old son back then. I mean, you got to be kidding me. And so once I started having that shift and I started looking at myself in the mirror and I started saying, what are you going to do? How early are you going to wake up? How many books are you going to read? How many YouTube videos will you study? How many people will you talk to? How many arguments will you subside? How many times throughout the day will you think about the things that you're thinking about? What are you going to do and how are you going to show up? And so I started spending way more time working on myself than hoping, wishing, and even praying that things and people and circumstances and opportunity outside of me showed up. At the time, Jamil wanted it to show up, but Jamil had to go and produce and create his own outcomes. And so when a person does that, and I give all these beautiful stories throughout shift number 2, but when a person does that, what they do is they take extreme ownership, and now they put themselves back in the driver's seat of their own life. See, one of the things I was doing is I was letting everyone else drive my car. I was letting everyone else drive my vehicle, and based on where they wanted to take me, then that's where I would show up. And I learned that that's not leadership. And that is not how the most successful people show up in life. The most successful people say, if it's going to be, it's going to be up to me. When it goes well, I'm going to praise everyone else, right? I'm going to praise my family. I'm going to praise my team. When it doesn't go well, that's on my shoulders. What are you going to do? And how are you going to show up tomorrow and change the situation?
Wow. That is such a huge shift. And I am so honored that I was part of that, really, because I saw that realization. It wasn't always easy, that's for sure. But this is one of the things I loved about you and still do is, as difficult as it was clear Jamelle versus Jamil. And you stepped into leadership. And if you didn't know how to do something, you made sure you learned how to do something. And my opinion is this is where so many of us fall short, that we're not willing to do the push-ups when no one's looking, when we don't really have to, when, oh, it's fine, I'll skate by. And I loved shift 2, the whole chapter. It was just so good. And I can hardly wait for everyone to read that as well. I wanted to ask you one thing about shift 5, but do you want to share something about shift 10 since you said that's your favorite?
No, because if I start talking about that shift, then that will definitely take us up to the top of the hour. I could talk about that one all day long.
So I just wanted to ask you, in shift 5, you said this, and I really, really love this. And I'm sure there's, the thing is, Jamelle, like all of these shifts, there's a lot more to the story, right? So we could be here for a few hours, which we're not going to be, by the way. Don't worry, everyone. Even though I'm sure everyone could just sit and listen to you for hours. I know I could. So in shift 5, you said, once you move from believing to knowing,
Mhm.
you will become unstoppable.
Yeah.
And it's another superpower that you possess.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear you share a little bit about this. Is
Well,
it possible to share a little bit?
um, once you move from believing to knowing, then you will be unstoppable. It is absolutely true. Don't we see it all the time? And just the little things that we do, Karen. I remember when I started um, driving, and I know for you that may have been, back in the 60s or so, but for me, that was in the 90s. And I remember how nervous I was, and I was questioning myself all the time whether or not I could drive and operate a vehicle. And so I was hoping, I was wishing for the best. I wanted to believe that it was okay. And then all of a sudden, I really just stepped into, um, just just leaned in and stepped into it. Didn't we all do that? Right. And then
Yeah.
when you first started driving, you're all nervous and your hand is at, what is it, 12-3, and you're scared to make a mistake. And then after a while, you're leaning back, you're not even paying attention. You get to your destination, you don't even remember how you got there because you had moved from this state of unconscious consciousness to where you're afraid, you're questioning, you're not aware of how powerful you are. And then after a while, you're like, oh my gosh, I got this. There's no problem. And then you can do it while kids are screaming in the background, and your husband or wife might be talking to you, or you're on the phone, all sorts of stuff. That's what I started realizing in life. And I tell this story about Neo in the Matrix. And if anyone's never seen this movie, it's a brilliant movie that was done so tastefully, especially back then, because it really talked about the future. And it had this main character called Neo. And Neo basically was just this normal guy, but he had this mentor named Morpheus, that was given a glimpse into the future by the Oracle. And the Oracle told Morpheus, "You're going to find this guy who's going to be the leader of the free world, and you don't really know what he looks like, but once you find him, you'll know, and he'll know." And so Morpheus and his team found this guy named Neo, and right away they started telling him that he was the one, that he was the one. The problem was Neo didn't know that he was the one. He didn't have the knowing, and at that point he didn't even have the belief. And so Morpheus asked him, he challenged him. He said, you can go on this journey to really discover who you really are if you take this pill, or you can stay exactly who you are, which is a normal everyday guy, if you take this pill. And so Neil was curious. He didn't believe, he certainly didn't know, but he had enough curiosity to at least start the journey. Most people, Karen, don't even want to start the journey though. And so as he went through the journey, he started moving from a state of contemplation. He started moving from a state of being unsure. He started to have all of these situations, these opportunities to go a little bit deeper to find out who he was. And then at the end of the movie, he realizes he moves from the state of knowing what everybody else was telling him. Because we always have people that breathe life into us, whether it's our moms or our dads, or in this case, Karen, you breathing life into me. And so we have people who are, championing us from the outside, but it doesn't matter what they think or say about us. It only matters what we think and say about ourselves. And so through the course of
Mhm.
the movie, he gets to this climax to where he's fighting the bad guy. And he had known, people had told him that once you move from a state of believing to a state of knowing, then you don't even have to fight anymore. Listen to what I'm saying. You don't even have to fight anymore. It's the same thing for us. So when he moved to a state of knowing that he was the one, why are you here? What is your purpose? I asked a group of friends who came here to have retreat at my property. I asked them, I said, why are you here? And at first they thought I was asking them, why are you here at my house? And then they realized what I was asking them was, why are you here on earth? You were all here for a very, very specific reason. Our job is to find out what is that reason. Most people spend so much time um, um, focused on other things than they do on that very question. And so once he realized, wow,
Mhm.
I'm that guy, I'm the one. In that moment, he stopped the bullets in midair. He fought with one hand. Everything was slow motion. And then he didn't even walk like a normal human being anymore. He started flying through life. What that illustration is we can do the same thing. We can fly through life. We don't have to have the same struggles anymore. We don't have to have the same situations. We don't even have to have the same battles anymore. If we realize that you are the one, that you are here for abundance, that you are here to do great things, that you are here to resurrect the lives of other people, that you are here to strive towards freedom, that you are here to do all of these incredible things. But most people don't tap into it. So in that shift, I started realizing that, huh, while I was really growing my business, um, I was really dragging my feet because I was still hoping and I was still wishing, and I was still a lot of times just sit there and pray. And then once I shifted into knowing this is what I'm here for, then that's when you become unstoppable because you're no longer second guessing. You're just like a locomotive train that this train is moving and it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop for anyone because this is part of my purpose and I don't have to hope anymore. I know.
Wow, that is so powerful and such a powerful question. Probably that most haven't asked themselves. Why are you here? That's something to really think about tonight and tomorrow and for the next week until you really have it clearly in your mind. Like, why are you here? So one more thing, and then we'll call it a night. Um, I would love for you to share the 40 mentors that you know about.
So,
Mental mentors, I said mentors, but
okay.
mental mentors.
So you want me to share all 40 of them?
No. So what was the purpose of adding those in there? I know I've heard you talk a little bit about that, and I really loved how you shared that.
Yeah. So for anyone that has the 12 shifts, um, strategically placed throughout this book, when you open it, all the pages are white, but you'll see the black pages are the mental mentors. Um, in this book and in my life, probably the most important thing to me is becoming what I call a surgical master of my mind. Shift number one talks about you have superpowers. And what I let the reader know straight away is your greatest superpower is your own ability to think. And so there's a great story um, that actually Bishop T. Jakes talks about. And he talks about he's in the Serengeti in Africa. And he's there with the with a zoologist, and he's there with the Zulu. And the Zulu was driving around while the zoologist is telling the crew about all these different animals and all these different species. And I know, Karen, I think you did something cool like that before. And so as he's telling the story, what he's saying is he realizes that the lion has this big roar, roar, and that's his kind of superpower, his defense mechanism. And then he sees a cheetah who's scampering across the desert, and the cheetah has this superpower, which is its speed, right? The fastest land animal. And then you see the eagle in the sky, and his superpower is his wings and his ability to soar higher than any other bird. And then you see the hippopotamus in the pond, and his superpower is his brute strength and his ability to maneuver even with all that mass and glide through the water. And so he says, and he's talking to God, and he says, well, what's man's superpower? What's my superpower? And then God replies, I've given you a brain. I've given you the ability to think. No other creature on earth has what you have. They cannot think and compute and understand and reason and have consciousness like you do. This is why you are the highest being, highest living creature. And so what I outline in shift number one is most people don't know how to think. I certainly didn't. And this was one of the biggest things that you helped me with because I had the ambition. I wanted more out of life, for sure. I just didn't know how to think in ways that actually served what I wanted. I wanted happiness. I wanted peace. I wanted joy. I wanted fulfillment. I wanted a valuable relationship. I did. I just didn't know how to think in ways that served what I wanted. I wanted to be free financially. I wanted to have time and abundance. I wanted the accoutrements as well. I wanted to build a really successful business. I wanted all those things, but my disappointment, my discouragement, and quite frankly, my suffering all was because I didn't know how to think properly. And so these mental mentors are all the people throughout that journey that said things to me that helped me change and reframe the way that I think. And most of my days, even now, are spent more married to myself and being intimate with myself in my mind than it is with people out there. See, I talk to myself more than I talk to anyone else. And I'm constantly shifting my thoughts, constantly. I catch them all the time. And then you and others have taught me, how do I create a new story? And before, years ago, my philosophies were off. My contracts were off. My mindset was off. And I didn't know how to shift them. So I wanted to leave the readers with all of these little mentors, mental mentors for them to meditate on, for them to chew on, for them to start understanding. Like this one, they said, here, they said, make sure to leave an inheritance, not just for your kids, but for your kids' kids. And so it's all of these little philosophical mind kind of triggering things that are there to make you think, what does that mean? And how if I do that, how does that bring more joy and fulfillment? And quite frankly, if we were talking about shift number 10, how does this serve to better mankind? And so that's what all these mental mentors are people throughout the last 7 years that basically have helped me shift the way that I think.
So good. I love this book so much, and even more than I even thought I would. You know, I've read it and you walk with me as well. So I've listened several times because it's just like anything. Every time you listen or read, you learn something different. You're more open to hear something different. So are all of you ready to follow a mentor who's true desire and truly create the success and desire? I mean, Jamelle has given us, to me, Ooh, and this is where I could get emotional. Such an amazing gift. Because he wants to, because he cares about people, because he has a desire to assist us to find our own and never uncover their superpowers. And none of us want to leave any of that on the table. So get the book, even if you think, oh no, I got all that down. I promise you, you do not different listening as I'm talking to people. And if they're about someone that's stuck or struggling or in the 12 shifts, I promise you it'll change your life because it's changed my life. And Jamelle and I were together for a lot of this, but it's so incredible. So I'm going to put the link in the thread to make sure know because it's in Jamelle's voice. So, he'll just be chatting with you when you're walking. And then once you've read it, listened, the ebook, whatever, go leave a review on Amazon. Because he's get the word out to more people. So many people can benefit from his hard work, his blood, sweat, and tears that he really experienced to get to that point, and really putting it in writing, simple, easy to read. And that's why I call it a handbook. Because that's what it feels like. I appreciate you being on with me tonight. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. And I appreciate you taking the time, and thank you for everyone that's been on. And I really do believe in this book. I think it's a great book. And I appreciate anyone who gets it and shares it. And I think daily, since this book was released, I probably have at least 5 to 10 people that reach out to me and leave their takeaways and how it's really helped them. And I appreciate those. So keep those coming. And Karen, you've been a huge blessing to me. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you. You've been a blessing to me. Love you, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much. Bye.